Hi, Tilly.
Going.
It's going. Hopefully everybody can join us. I haven't heard of any technical outages or power outages or technical failures due to the weather at this point, but who knows? Prepared for anything.
Professor Saunders, I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
So I saw that you like reshared your box with us. And
That's that's Dr. Boyle's box that I shared. And hopefully you can access it.
the box link, the box folder.
Yeah.
I think last time, and I can try
But
again, but it like I accepted the invite, but it wouldn't show up in my box.
okay, I think I misunderstood your question initially. So yes, I have been unable to resolve the issue with Box. So I will email you any relevant files, and you're just going to have to save them in a place on your computer. But most things will be posted in Canvas, so that's not a huge issue. But today, I sent an email. Did everyone receive an email today from me? Okay, I see nodding, some nodding, maybe less nodding than I would like. Okay, more nodding. Okay, yes, I sent an email today with a practice assignment prepared by Dr. Boyle. That between that and the video that she prepared about how to access the virtual desktop, how to import the files, these things combined are fabulous resources to prepare you for the R practical next week. So I want to encourage you to take the time to use that resource and practice. There won't be any curveballs, any surprise questions. We're going to go over in the PowerPoint today what to expect on the practical, but it's everything that you have done before. And so we're just going to ask you to do it independently, but still open notes. But if you get stuck, like this is the part where you're supposed to be able to solve the problems on your own because you've completed the assignments, you've done the practice assignments, and you've asked for help if you need it. So I think I've been getting everybody the help that they need. If you haven't received some help and you're stuck in any way, then please let me know. Another thing I wanted to ask right before we get started was, are y'all able to see the graded feedback I posted in Canvas for the Intro to R and the stomatal density assignments? Yes, we can all see that. Okay, it had some weird hidden setting and I think I took it off, but that should be visible. So people did a really good job with that for the most part. Sometimes there were some little formatting issues that I addressed in the feedback, and but you had the from what I saw, you had the basics of what again what we're going to do. It'll be for that stomatal aperture assignment that's due next week. So you'll practice again preparing those skills for the R practical next week. And so I think that we're all on the right track. And I don't want anyone to get too panicked about the R thing. I'm a little nervous, I can't lie, because R has been a little bit of an escapade so far, but we're getting there. And to that end, we are going to, at least for this week, we're trying a new way of providing the assignment. So hopefully you've gone in Canvas and you were like, oh, look, there's R code this week. So there's R code this week. Instead of you typing something in or copying and pasting it into the console yourself, we have prepared script that you just open in RStudio and run it. And then you're going to simply tweak some variables as you go through to run these different simulations and see what happens, to test some predictions. And it should be fun. Like after what we've done so far and kind of the struggles to produce what we were desiring, this comparatively should be number one, a shorter lab. That was by design because last couple labs have been going the full time and then some for many people. So today's lab is going to be hopefully a little bit shorter. And then, yeah, so we'll, and we're also providing that R script for you so that you can kind of focus more on thinking about your predictions, thinking about what will happen as you manipulate these variables, and not focus so much on avoiding typos while you're in the R console. So any questions about any of that before we get into today's lab? All right, I'm gonna share my screen. All right, so our goal of today's lab is to explore mechanisms of evolution. And the lab handout, which hopefully you spent some time with before lab, because it is fairly dense and maybe you are covering or have covered this stuff in 140, but maybe you haven't yet. So given that everyone absorbs this information at their own speed, it is incumbent upon you to spend the time to read this before lab so that I don't have to spend a lot of time talking about it and it's just a brief review. So that's the idea. And so to that end, we're going to briefly talk about the 4 mechanisms of evolution, well 5, that the lab handout mentions. But today's lab, in the name of brevity and being able to be done in a reasonable amount of time, will only focus on 2 of those 4 mechanisms. So when we're talking about evolution, what are we talking about in biology class? Like what is, we throw this term around a lot and it means maybe different things in different contexts, but it has a pretty specific connotation in a biology classroom. Would anyone like to take a stab at
it? I could try to make a
Yeah,
definition of
Geneva, please, thank you.
it. Like a definition could be like the mechanisms of which allele frequency and gene frequency develops over long periods of time in populations.
Very good. You brought in pretty much all the pieces that we need for that definition. That it is a change in allele frequencies, that this is happening in a population, and it's happening usually over a long period of time. It can happen over short spans of time, but usually we're talking about longer periods of time. So great, thank you for that, Geneva. But we also talk about things happening on an individual level. So we have changes that can happen on an individual level. What are we talking about when we're talking about individual level differences? What's the term for that? It's one of our 4 mechanisms. Just take a guess, somebody.
Is it gene flow?
It's not gene flow, but that's a good guess. Want to try another?
Would it be sexual selection?
Sexual selection. So we'll talk about natural selection in just a moment. And sexual selection is kind of like a subset of natural selection. It's not very well laid out like that within the handout, but that's a good framework within which to view it. So there's just a couple more options. So we're talking about individual level differences. What's happening at a genetic level when that produces these differences within populations? We have to have what in our genetic code?
Mutations.
Mutations, sure. So we can think of mutations as the fuel for natural selection. So natural selection is, again, something that's happening over time. It's happening in populations, but it has to happen in populations that have differences as a result of genetic differences. So those have to give rise to phenotypic differences on which the environment can act to produce this change in allele frequencies over time in that population. And so that's natural selection. Sexual selection is a subset of that. It is also like natural selection, it is reductive in genetic diversity. You can think of it, I heard a nice analogy that it is like a sculptor, like natural selection is like a sculptor working on a population to remove genetic diversity to bring forth the most fit offspring for that population in that given geographic area. So that's one way to think of it. So it does tend to decrease genetic diversity. Likewise, genetic drift will decrease genetic diversity. And what is the defining characteristic when we're talking about genetic drift?
Well, isn't genetic drift like the idea that like populations are more affected by like diseases and mistakes if they're kind of smaller?
Yes, Izzy, that's absolutely true. Genetic drift acts more strongly on small populations. That's very much a phenomenon associated with genetic drift. But when we're talking about genetic drift, we are also talking about like random chance changes within the population. And sometimes it sounds like it's due to like random events, like a volcanic eruption or something, but it's just more a phenomenon of sampling in which as you sample allele frequencies that aren't entirely representative of the population, and that is due to random chance when you take that sample. And you can this is analogous to like flipping a coin. So if you flip a coin 100 times, you expect that you would get pretty close to 50-50 heads and tails in the number of coin tosses. But if you only flipped a coin 6 times, then you might get 4 heads and 2 tails, or you might get 5 heads and 1 tails, or whatever, because it's a smaller population, like Izzy was alluding to, or a smaller sampling, then you have a greater exaggeration of these differences. All right, so and we already mentioned mutation. So mutation we can think of as the fuel for natural selection. We have to have this genetic mutation that exists within the population on which the environment can act on to produce a more fit offspring for that population. And gene flow. So when we're talking about gene flow, what are we referring to there?
Is it the movement of individuals between two populations and communities?
It can be individuals, absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. Or it can be things like gametes, or like pollen or spores can move around. So not necessarily just individuals, but exactly right. So the movement of alleles between populations is what we want to think about. All right, so due to the nature of our lab setting, we will only be looking at exploring mechanisms of evolution related to natural selection and genetic drift. But please do familiarize yourself with the gene flow and mutation text in the lab handout as well. So we'll use R to understand these mechanisms of evolution, changing different variables to test our different predictions about what we think will happen in different situations, and seeing what happens when we do that. So again, using your lab handout, and it is, I have to say, like, folks have been doing a pretty good job of following directions with the lab, but reading that handout carefully and following the directions just helps tremendously. And please refer to that before you come asking questions. I'm happy to help, but it's a little frustrating when it's like right there in the lab handout and you just didn't read it carefully. So read it carefully, take some time, read it, ask questions, work in parallel with your partner. And we're going to run these simulations with natural selection and genetic drift. Again, we're giving you the R code this week. You're not writing your own script. You're not copying and pasting stuff in. You're just going to open these files in RStudio and run with it. And then you'll be changing those specific variables as is specified in the lab handout. So just follow that and it should be really interesting. Again, working in parallel, comparing results, sharing your screens, asking each other questions. You know, don't run the same simulation as your partner. Change, do different variables, and see what happens if you increase this or decrease that. Get creative. And like our previous weeks, you'll be submitting a Word document with your responses from the questions in the lab handout. And the lab practical this week, or next week rather, sorry, hope I didn't scare anybody, it's next week. It'll be the first thing that we do. And as I said, it is going to be things that you have done before, that you've practiced, and hopefully have a level of mastery that you can demonstrate next week independently with your notes. But working to conduct a t-test, run those summary statistics, and construct a bar graph. You'll also be asked to put in a conclusion and report your statistics appropriately. So if you did that last week and I said, great work with your stomata density, then do it like that. But if I said, do it like this, and I gave you an example, make sure that that's how you do it, because that's what I'm looking for. And it's pretty straightforward. Just refer to that. Again, it's going to be open note. Use your scripts. So save. You don't want to save this week's. I mean, you can, but you won't need these scripts this week in the future. But your scripts that you prepare, particularly as you're going back and preparing for this practical, which I definitely recommend that you spend some time. Let's say that you've gotten kind of lucky so far and you've not run into a bunch of problems with R and you're feeling pretty good about it. Just go ahead and do that practice assignment and see if you do run into some problems. Maybe you're just a R, natural, and you're gonna do just fine on the practical. But maybe when you encounter a different situation, you run into a little problem, and then you have a chance to solve it and know how to solve that if you encounter it again when you're working independently. So again, practice does pay off. So you'll need to be able to read and save files within R. You're going to also be expected to be able to open. So you're going to open an Excel file, do a conversion or calculation using Excel formulas. So all of this stuff is already on Canvas that you can review if you're not familiar or comfortable with. And be able to do the summary statistics, conduct the t-test, and construct the paragraph with a appropriate conclusion and reporting statistics. Questions about that or anything else so far?
Will we have a time limit, or what's the time given to do this practical?
I believe it's 15 minutes, which when you consider it's open notes, we're going to give you the Excel table. You're just going to open it. You're going to do your conversion. You're going to open it in R. You're going to run the script. You're going to make your conclusion. I think you'll have plenty of time in which to do that if you're comfortable with doing it. That's why I'm stressing do that practice assignment so you don't freeze up and don't get confused about what step happens before which. You're going to have a hard time constructing your bar graph if you don't do your summary statistics first, for example. So like you need to do all of it and be able to do it independently. Okay, other questions? All right, let's see. So again, I want to remind you that your stomatal aperture write-up is due before lab next week. So get that turned in so that you make sure that you have that additional practice with R and doing these things that we're going to ask you to do on the practical. And then our animal behavior lab is next week. Why won't this go away? And so make sure you read that and come prepared for lab next week. So again, we're going to, I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms. I'm going to give you some time to get oriented to the material, find what you're doing. You know, the stuff's on Canvas. Get your R open, and then we'll come around and check on you. Of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask for help, raise a hand, or pop into the main meeting, however you want to do it. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms with different partners. Oh, here I have a chat. Who's Fusen? What's 1-5?
Oh, I was asking if you were saying 15 or 50. Yeah.
Oh, great
I
question.
got it.
15, 1-5. Yeah, sorry. I apologize for not seeing that in a more timely manner. Okay, and so when I put you in breakout rooms, please let me know if I pair you with someone with whom you have been paired before, because we want you to get to interact with different people throughout the semester. So, all right, we'll start with Angie and Brooklyn in room 1. Anthony and Emma in room 2.
Me and Angie already worked together
Brooklyn and Angie?
a couple weeks. Yes.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I knew this wouldn't be easy, and I don't have a great way to record this. Okay, so Brooklyn and Emma in room 1. Angie and Anthony, have y'all worked together?
No.
Great. All right. Well, you get to today. And let's see, Chapman and Geneva. Genevieve and Jack. Haley and Lucy. Izzy and Mary. Jewel and Oliver. Marge and Prim. And Malin and Fusen. All right. Go do the stuff. Let me know if you need help. We'll be around to check on you.
Hello.
Hey,